The morning sun spilled golden light through the cafe's large windows, illuminating the warm aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Lila wiped down the counter, her hands moving almost automatically. She had worked at the daily grind for 3 years now, and her life had settled into a rhythm as predictable as the steam rising from her lattes. Lila liked her life that way, quiet, simple, and controllable. She knew every customer by name, remembered their favorite drinks, and sometimes, when the cafe was empty, she allowed herself to imagine stories about their lives. Not real stories, fictional ones, like the plots she sometimes read in novels, but just enough to make her mundane life feel richer. Today, as she served a cappuccino to Mrs. Carmichael, a regular with an obsession for almond croissants, Lila noticed an envelope sitting on the counter. She frowned. It wasn't in the usual stack of bills or invoices. This envelope was delicate, cream-colored, and smelled faintly of lavender. Her name, Lila Hart, was written in elegant, flowing handwriting she didn't recognize. Curiosity piqued, she tore it open carefully. Inside was a letter, the first of many she would soon receive. Dear Lila, I don't know if this reaches you at the right moment, but I cannot keep these thoughts to myself any longer. Every time I imagine you making coffee, I see more than a barista, I see art, I see kindness, I see a story waiting to be told. Lila blinked. She reread the words, a strange flutter in her chest. Was this some kind of prank? The letter smelled of intent, of honesty. And beneath the words, there was a signature she almost dropped the letter to examine, Avery Sinclair. She didn't know the name. Avery Sinclair? The letter sounded familiar somehow, but not in a personal sense, it sounded like someone whose words belonged in a book. And then she remembered. Avery Sinclair was a best-selling author, one of the most admired romance writers in the country. Lila had read a couple of her novels years ago and remembered the intensity, the beauty of her words, and the uncanny way they reached straight into your chest and made it ache. Why was Avery Sinclair writing to her? She only made coffee. The next morning, Lila returned to the cafe with the letter carefully tucked into her apron pocket. She couldn't tell anyone about it, it was too personal, too intimate to be discussed casually. Every time she poured a latte or crafted a mocha, her mind wandered to the mysterious author who had noticed her. By the third letter, Lila's routine began to unravel. Each envelope contained more than words. Drawings of the cafe, little sketches of the coffee cups she used, even descriptions of her movements, her gestures, her expressions. Avery Sinclair had somehow observed her, without being seen. I saw you yesterday, smiling at that little girl with chocolate on her face. You didn't know anyone was watching, but I did. Lila, there is something about you, something I cannot resist. The letters made her heart pound, but they also made her anxious. What if this was dangerous? What if a famous author was stalking her? She tried to dismiss the idea, telling herself it was harmless infatuation expressed through writing. But when she found a note tucked into her apron one rainy afternoon that said, "Meet me where the city sleeps and the world whispers. 7 p.m. Only if you wish to, she knew she had a choice to make. Curiosity outweighed caution. That evening, as the rain splattered the pavement and neon signs reflected in puddles, Lila stood outside the old bookshop suggested in the letter. Her heart raced like it had never raced before. She hesitated, then stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed. And there she was. Avery Sinclair. Not the character in a novel, not a name in a letter, but a real person, tall, with piercing green eyes and a smile that felt both dangerous and tender. Lila, Avery whispered, as if her name had been on her lips for decades. Lila's voice caught. You wrote me these letters? I did, Avery admitted, moving closer. And I will keep writing them, if you let me. The bookshop smelled of old paper and something floral, a comforting and intoxicating mix. Avery led Lila to a quiet corner, away from the few lingering customers. Lila felt her pulse accelerate, her hands trembling as she sipped her water. I've been writing about you long before this moment, Avery confessed, eyes locking onto hers. Every detail I've noticed, every laugh, every gesture, I've stored it in my heart. And I had to know, if you were real. Lila wanted to laugh. Or cry. Or run. The combination of fear, excitement, and disbelief was overwhelming. But there was something magnetic about Avery, something in the way her voice wrapped around every word like a warm blanket. Why me? Lila asked finally, voice almost a whisper. Because you make the ordinary extraordinary, Avery said simply. You turn coffee into poetry, smiles into sunlight, and life, into something worth reading about. That was the spark. The moment when reality and fantasy collided. Avery's hand brushed against Lila's lightly, a fleeting touch that ignited a fire in Lila she had never felt before. She couldn't resist the pull. By the time they left the bookshop, the rain had stopped. The streets glistened like wet glass, and Lila found herself holding Avery's hand without realizing it. There was laughter, shy and nervous, but a promise lingered between them, unspoken but powerful. Next time, Avery murmured, leaning closer, I'll make coffee with you. Lila felt her knees go weak. Coffee? Together? Her life was about to be anything but ordinary. The following week, Lila closed the cafe early for the first time in years. Avery had insisted on helping her make coffee, a bold, somewhat awkward request, but Lila had agreed. There was a strange intimacy in the act of brewing coffee together, measuring beans, frothing milk, pouring latte art that inevitably turned into laughing disasters. Avery's fingers brushed against Lila's as they worked side by side. Each touch was electric, making the mundane act of coffee making feel like a dance. I've never made coffee like this before, Avery admitted, her hair falling into her eyes. Lila tucked it behind her ear, heart hammering. Most people just drink it, Lila teased softly. You appreciate it. I appreciate you, Avery whispered, and that phrase hung between them heavier than steam from the espresso machine. As the cafe emptied and the evening deepened, they shared more than coffee. Stories, secrets, and laughter flowed effortlessly. Avery spoke of her novels, of her fears, and of her fascination with people's hidden lives. Lila spoke of her dreams, small though they were, and her love for the simplicity of making someone's day better with a cup of coffee. The moment their eyes met, something undeniable passed between them. Avery leaned in slowly, and Lila, caught in the whirlwind of desire and tenderness, closed the gap. Their lips met, softly at first, then with a growing intensity, a mixture of curiosity, longing, and undeniable connection. It was a kiss that promised more than passion, it promised discovery. Days turned into weeks. Lila and Avery's connection deepened, hidden from the bustling city outside. But the outside world couldn't stay away forever. Fans, rumors, and the sheer intensity of Avery's fame loomed like a shadow over their budding romance. How can we even do this? Lila asked one night, curled against Avery on her small couch, coffee mugs cooling beside them. You're famous. I'm just me. Avery held her face gently. And I love just you, Lila. Not the barista who serves people coffee, not the girl who smiles politely at strangers, I love you. Every little piece of you. It was a confession that shook Lila to her core. Fame, letters, sketches, it didn't matter. She realized love had arrived, unannounced, in the form of letters that had once seemed impossible. But challenges remained. Avery's next book launch threatened to expose everything. Paparazzi could recognize Lila in a second. Yet, for the first time, Lila didn't want to hide. She wanted to fight for this love, for these letters that had transformed her ordinary life into something extraordinary. Finally, the day came when Avery's next book launched, a book dedicated to Lila, veiled in the guise of fiction but unmistakably inspired by their love. In the dedication, Avery wrote, "For Lila, who taught me that love can be found in the smallest gestures, the quietest smiles, and the warmth of a perfect cup of coffee." Lila read it alone at the cafe, tears in her eyes. The letters, the secret meetings, the love, they were no longer just words on paper. They were real. Later that evening, Avery arrived at the cafe, standing by the counter, eyes full of longing. Without a word, Lila crossed the space between them and kissed her, slow, passionate, tender. The cafe smelled of espresso and love, a mixture that would linger in their memories forever. "I only make coffee," Lila whispered, laughing softly against Avery's lips. "And yet," Avery murmured, holding her close, "you've made my entire world." And in that moment, the letters stopped being a mystery. They had become a reality, a love story born from quiet gestures, handwritten words, and the magic of noticing someone extraordinary in the ordinary.